everyone. We're going to get started. Let me just make sure my mic is fully working, or maybe I'll just have to speak really closely. But hi everyone, my name is Jessica. I'm the founder of Asian Founders Club. We're a New York City-based community of Asian Gen Z founders and creators. And thank you guys all for being here today for our Gen Z Meets Gen AI panel. Here we have two wonderful founders from our community, Rushabh, who's the CTO of Pontus, and Saumya, who's the CTO of Pharmesol. So yeah, I guess I'll take it away for you guys to introduce yourselves. Saumya, would you like to start?
That sounds good. Great to meet everybody. I'm Saumya, co-founder and CTO of Pharmesol. My background is actually in machine learning applied in healthcare, and at Pharmesol, we're automating conversations for pharmacy teams. So both outbound calls that pharmacies make to patients to tell them their prescriptions are ready, as well as any inbound calls that patients have. So they may be asking, is my prescription ready? Can I get it shipped? I want to change my address. I want to pay for it. We handle that full range of calls for pharmacies.
And hi, I'm Rushabh. I'm the co-founder and CTO of Pontus. We're very focused on cost center optimizations for large enterprises. So think banks, other kind of companies that have large amounts of expenses that they don't really want to deal with, think legal, HR, etc. So we do a lot of work with them to process mine and understand what kind of processes they might have and where AI might be useful.
Thank you guys for the wonderful intros. Can you guys share a little bit about how you guys got interested in startups, and maybe after that share how you came up with the idea for your respective startups?
So I feel like my interest in entrepreneurship and startups actually started in high school from watching a lot of Shark Tank. I feel like that's when it was kind of coming up, and every day at home we would eat dinner and watch Shark Tank. So, my family, we didn't eat dinner at the dining table, we eat in front of the TV. So when I went to college, I knew I wanted to do a startup. I just didn't know what I wanted to do it in and who I wanted to do it with. So I spent a ton of time just ideating, working on a lot of different things. And then my last semester of college, I took a class called Healthcare Ventures, and I actually met my co-founder there. So she's a pharmacist, and then my background, I was doing a lot of research in how you can apply AI in healthcare, and we just came together and just started talking about the problems she was seeing as a pharmacist and in the pharmacy space. And I think as a technical person, it just sort of you hit like this light bulb moment of like, well, this seems like an easy problem to solve. Like, why is there no solution for it? So we went out, and that's how we sort of like got started, just talking to people and realizing that there's a problem and there's something that we could do for it.
I think my background's quite different. I didn't really anticipate growing up that I'd ever be in the startup space. So I was really interested as a kid in like math and physics, and that's what I went to university for. And I basically spent all my years in university doing just research and thinking that I would be either in academia or some kind of industrial application. But after a few years of working for some big tech companies and the military, I kind of realized that I wanted something different. So I ended up joining a startup where I ended up meeting my co-founder, and as much as it was an up-and-down experience, I think I got addicted to the idea of small companies and small teams that just move really fast and do really cool things. And I think it became obvious to me that the next step for me at that point was founding a company. I just didn't know in what.
So then, how did you come up with the idea for Pontus?
I think it was kind of an organic process. So we didn't really start with this idea of cost center optimizations. We originally had this idea to work with survey data. So my co-founder had a pretty extensive background in medical surveys, and we wanted to have some kind of process that allowed companies to take large-scale surveys of their patients and understand what kind of products and what kind of marketing is necessary to sell those products and reach a broader audience. And we started we started pushing this product and showing potential investors, and we realized very quickly that there's a huge AI application to the work we were doing, in the sense that a lot of the data we were creating was very applicable in training machine learning models that would be able to do the kind of analytics we want to do, but at a much larger scale. And that's the point where we kind of started moving more in the direction of machine learning, and I started leveraging more of my background, which was in data analytics and data privacy. And from all of that, we realized that the biggest industry that cares about data privacy and building out their automations is the financial sector, and that's kind of how we ended up where we are.
Thanks so much for sharing that. So I feel like both of you guys are in sectors where the, I guess, hurdles to actually breaking in is very hard because both are very, like healthcare and finance are both very highly regulated industries. And I think it seems like both of you guys also just didn't come from like an extensive background in those industries either, having spent only a few years in the workforce prior to starting your startups. So I'm very curious how you guys approached your go-to-market strategy for breaking into these highly regulated industries and where you found early success.
I think the biggest thing and lesson here is it just takes a lot of time. Like, you just have to keep going at it. And for us in particular, so our focus was always around medications and the communication with patients about their medications. But there are a lot of people in healthcare who are affiliated with medications, from your doctor to your insurance company to the actual pharmacy, the people who actually deliver your medication, all these different people. And for us, the way we went about our go-to-market was just talking to everybody. And I think the biggest key component was thinking about who has budget and who can we bring the highest ROI to. So there are, for example, your doctor's office, there are a lot of things they do outside of medications versus the pharmacy. The only thing they do is medications. And how they make money is by selling the medication. If you can't get a hold of a patient, then you didn't sell that medication and you lost a lot of money, just revenue there. So there was so much impact we could make for pharmacy teams, and that's sort of how we landed there. But it was a long journey towards getting there. We actually started in a different place, pivoted the whole product, and went about that. And then I think the other thing too on just actually executing in pharmacy is just building relationships. People have to trust you. It's not so much about, it's important to have different sort of security assessments and things in place in your product, but the bigger thing is, do they trust you, and do they trust you with having their patients' data? And that's all like relationship building. That takes time. A lot of conferences, a lot of people made introductions. We do a lot of webinars, pharmacy conferences, and that just, people know us now. They know when they think about pharmacy and AI, they think about our company, and they feel that trust because we've been vetted by their peers as well.
Yeah, I can echo a lot of those sentiments. It takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of relationship building. But I think the biggest thing is just leveraging your unfair advantages. It's very hard to break into established industries like healthcare or finance, especially if you don't have any kind of unfair advantages. So I think one of the things that we thought a lot about when we were founding a company is, what are the unfair advantages, not just that we have, but the people around us have? And, from going to conferences and building a network, we were able to find people who happen to be VPs at this company, or used to be a VP here and now is working at this company, or was an alumni at the same university I went to, but happens to be in this position. And you kind of start to build this extensive network of people within an industry when you focus on it for long enough. And from somewhere, you can kind of get a lead that will change the course of your company. And that's kind of been the, modus operandi that we've fallen under, where it's been like small jumps from meeting one person, then leading us to another client, and then having that conversation lead us to another deal. And it's not something that we could have anticipated, but just being in the space and constantly building those relationships helped us get us there.
I think a lot of Gen Z founders can relate to that, and the fact that you don't have those unfair advantages around connections and extensive knowledge in a particular industry matter, but it is really just hustling and being able to find the right people and spend a lot of time deepening those relationships. I guess going off of that question, I know there are thousands of AI startups out there. I think this is a very, very hot industry to be in right now, and there's only so many good ideas. in the world. So I guess when you think about like competing against all the other like AI startups, like what do you think are the factors in which like will make one like startup win over the other?
So I think one component of this is just like what protects you, like your barrier to entry. One of the things in healthcare is you have to be embedded in the workflow. Nobody wants another software tool that they have to like open up. They want everything to stay the same and be as seamless as possible, and that requires integrating into their existing systems, which are traditionally very hard to do in healthcare. It's very like gatekeeped, and you need introductions from your customers to those vendors to facilitate that, and it's a lengthy process. And that's something we've done, and that kind of really protects like the barrier of entry for other folks who maybe want to apply AI in the pharmacy space. But I think the underlying like root thing is like you just have to solve the customer's problem. For us, they don't care if we use AI or not. They just care is somebody doing this in a way that is cost effective, is going to make me more profits, and that's the biggest thing. And it's also, I think, the approach of like how you deploy the product or the customer to, and really focusing on this is how I'm solving your problem. These are the things you care about. They really don't care about what technology we're using. They just care about, you know, how many calls are people picking up, how many times are we saving them from like a transfer, how many times when we leave a voicemail does the patient actually then, you know, go and pay for their medication, and that's a successful delivery on their part.
I think when you're in space that's as regulated as healthcare or finance, it's less about what idea you have or how many competitors you have. It's just about, are you just solving the problem that your customer has? It's as simple as that. I think Ray Dalio was the one who said, ideas are useless, execution's everything. And I think when you're really working with these enterprises, they don't want to buy a product from you. They don't want to buy a platform. They don't want to buy anything. They just want to know, can you solve my problem? It's your responsibility to figure out, can I take the solutions that I'm building for company A, company B, and company C, and turn that into a platform? But you're not selling that platform to them. You're selling, I can solve your problem. And I think that's been really the echoing sentiment that's helped us really navigate this space. One of the things that we've noticed when we've been selling is we actually don't mention AI at all, which is kind of what you were talking about. AI is kind of a dirty word for a lot of these enterprises because they tried a lot of POCs from a lot of other startups, and almost all of them have really flashy UIs, they have really flashy demos, but then they don't actually work in production. Like, what's the point? Right? So for a lot of our customers, we just tell them, we're going to solve your problems. If it takes AI, we'll put AI in. If it doesn't, we won't. And that's all that matters.
I actually wanted to push a little bit deeper on that. I mean, I think it's a phenomenal answer. Like, there are a lot of products that say they do something and maybe they work like 70, 80% of the way, but don't hit that last like 90, 100%. So I'm curious how maybe you've been able to like be that team that has been able to make it like 95, 100% of the way when there's so many like smart, very well educated, talented teams out there. Like, what do you think are maybe the unique factors around your team?
I think it's mostly a game of communication. Like, especially when you're in the AI space, some level of errors or mishandling situations are just inevitable, but how do you handle those situations is really what determines how much trust your partners and your clients have in you. So are you proactive when setting up a strategy for detecting failures and notifying them and then potentially resolving them either with a manual flow or some kind of manual intervention? Or are you promising a product that is going to be 99% successful and then your hands are up when there actually is a failure? One of the things that the risk departments at the companies we've been selling to have told us is they found it a breath of fresh air that we start our presentations with an entire assessment of all the risk potential that there is. We tell them up front that this is where the technology is right now. You can't expect 100% reliability. That's not happening. But here's how we make it work.
Something very similar for us too. One of our customers in particular, they mentioned the reason why they really liked working with us was because we were responsive. And if something happened, if we needed them to manually call a patient, we sent them an email like immediately. They have our phone number. They can text us if something happens. They know, that we're available like 24/7 for them, and that's the biggest like comfort and trust they have with us, because they all understand like this is something brand new in pharmacy space. This hasn't been done. We use a lot of traditional like IVRs. It's like press 1 to do this, press 2 to do this. Input your RX number. This sort of like communication of using like large language models and having very human-like conversations with an AI agent is something brand new, and I think that's a key signal to also look for in your early customers is, do they understand that? If they're expecting 100%, then they honestly aren't like a good fit right now. It's something that over time, they may be somebody who will be a good customer, but right now, you're just a space we're in. Like, we understand that, and we need to make sure our customers understand that to have a successful relationship with them.
Seems like a lot of the challenges that you're facing are like highly technical. AI might not be there yet, and there's still a lot of iteration that needs to be done in order to create a product that works, 99.9% of the time. I'm curious, what are the maybe like more difficult, or maybe like the most difficult technical challenges that you guys are either facing or working through or have worked through, and maybe like challenges in terms of just the product itself, getting that to work, as well as like challenges in terms of like implementing that into legacy workflows in healthcare or in finance.
As you mentioned, there's two parts to this. So one part is we simply don't have access to do certain things because we're restricted by what pharmacies, their current software is, right? Because we're integrating into their existing systems, but if your system simply can't do something, then it's hard for us to do anything either. The other part of this is just having a lot of visibility into our actual system and seeing everything that's happening with the conversations. It's really, really hard to predict every single thing that a patient, a doctor, another pharmacy may say over the phone. So it's important to just have those guardrails built in that we make sure we're handling the situations that we can handle as accurately as possible. But the things we know we definitely can't handle, we're escalating those calls and we're building towards handling that in the future. This is another thing too, our customers, even though they have recordings of other calls, they actually don't, they can't list off every single type of call that has come in from a patient, the different like requests that have come in, and it's just an iterative process with our customers and continuously just building the technology based off of what we see and escalating when we need to.
Yeah, I think for us, the biggest technical challenge has mostly been on the side of explainability. So when you're building out AI functionality or AI features, all the features are great while they're working, but when they aren't, it's really important for humans to be able to understand why did it not work, right? Explain to me what is going on, how did you think through this, what was the failure mode that caused the failure, right? And one of the problems that we face with large language models and other unsupervised machine learning models are a lot of these models produce really great outputs, but you don't really have a lot of visibility into how it does that. And there have been a lot of new techniques that have kind of embedded this process. So there's prompting techniques called React and other techniques that are kind of on the forefront of the technology, but I'd still say that it's a relatively nascent space. So we're still trying to figure out what the right balance is between manual intervention in terms of understanding what kind of tuning we need to do for our models in order to get the performance we need, but also that communication aspect of, we expect this kind of reliability, this is a use case we didn't expect, we don't know exactly how this is going to behave. And learn with us will help you learn as well. On the non-technical aspect, I think the legacy systems are something that we've also struggled a lot with. A lot of financial companies and other enterprises have large data sets and data flows that have been built in Oracle and SAP and other large providers, and often these providers are meant to be built into an ecosystem. They're intentionally obtuse because they want to make sure that you stay within their ecosystem. So breaking through a lot of those barriers has been a pretty key challenge.
That definitely sounds like it. I guess switching gears a little bit, I'm curious, like, if you were to, like, both of you have been working on your respective startups for around 2 years now. If you guys were to break down these, like, 2 years into chapters, what would those chapters be? Like, and, like, where do you think you're at now, and where do you think you're going in, like, the next 1 to 2 years?
I feel like maybe that first chapter is just identifying, do you and your co-founders work well together? Figuring out, like, who's responsible for what, like, building that trust. In particular for me and my co-founder, like, we had met in a class. We didn't really know each other before then. We did, live together summer while we were doing an accelerator through, like, MIT. So there was a lot of bonding through just, you're living together. But I feel like that's, like, one chapter. It's just making sure this is, like, a good fit. Like, we can work well together. We have complementary responsibilities and experiences. I think the second chapter was, building a proof of concept and putting that in front of real patients and ensuring that, patients will actually respond to automated systems. If you ask open-ended, like, questions, they actually will respond. And then I think the next chapter was realizing that proof of concept, the market wasn't there for it. So pivoting the whole company and the whole product. And then I think now the chapter we're in is just, like, scaling our operations, given that we've done successful proof of concepts, like pilots, both for outbound and inbound calls, and now just closing more customers, and extending, our customer base and the number of calls and minutes we support for them.
Yeah, I think for us, a lot of the early chapters were trying to find product market fit in whatever capacity we could. So as I said before, we started with this idea of survey data, but one of the problems we had when trying to find product market fit was in, like, the Maslow's hierarchy of needs for all the things that are required to build an AI application. It was kind of too far up, right? You first need to build an application, you need to make sure it works, and then you worry about what data I want to ingest to make it better. So I think over the last few years, we've kind of moved further and further down from, hey, take this thing that you will need once you have a successful AI application, to how can we help you even get there? Because I think for a lot of organizations, it's going to take another 2-3 years before they can even see what value large language models or other AI innovations are even going to deliver for them. So a lot of the companies and a lot of the ideas that are out there right now, which are kind of AI application software, a lot of it is a little bit early, because those AI applications, you can't really get an ROI estimate on them until companies know what kind of money they put in and what do they get out for it. So we've kind of gone, like, 2 or 3 steps back, and now we're at the point where we are taking companies hand in hand from the entire process of discovering your problem, process mining that problem to understand what kind of manual and automated processes already exist within the organization, and what benefit our platform can serve for them.
I really respect anybody who's willing to see a problem and actually do something about it. And you guys are both left curving the whole AI tech scene, so props to you. I guess there's been a lot of challenges that you guys have faced technically, on the strategic side, on the go-to-market side. I'm also very curious, like, if there's been any, like, particular challenges that you've had to overcome on a more personal side, on that founder journey, on, being in your early 20s and building a startup, on either, like, building on a team, like confidence, leadership, anything kind of, like, related to that. Do you guys have, like, your, like, number one, like, personal challenge that you faced?
I think over time, just my confidence and, like, hope and faith in myself has tremendously increased. I started this company right out of school. So I was essentially finishing up my master's. I was working full time, and then I was doing this on the side as well. So just had a lot going on, but this just, it made sense. We spoke to so many clinicians, and I felt like there was really a need for this. There's just simply not enough communication with patients regarding their medication needs. It was just not happening. And if patients did try to get a hold of a clinician, they couldn't. So it's very obvious to me that there was a problem. And for me, I always wanted to do something in healthcare, and this seemed like a good opportunity to do it. But when you're very young in your career, and it's, I'd like worked as a software engineer for a year, I'd done a lot of internships. You're almost like second guessing your technical decisions. It's building out the full technical product. Especially now you have your hands in every part of the system. Typically when you're a software engineer at a company, you're isolated into one component of that company's product rather than the full scope of work. So, it was a lot of communication with just like our advisors, making sure we're making the right choices. But I feel like pretty confident. I think now we can like make those choices quicker. It's a lot less like second guessing yourself, and it's more about, this makes sense, let's do it. If it doesn't work, then it's okay, we can do something else. I think the other hard thing is just my peers and my friends from college, everybody else, they have a very different life than me. I work weekends, and whenever I tell people that, they're very confused. So there's a lot of that just like difference, but everybody, I'm lucky to have like supportive friends, but it is very different that despite being the same age, we have very different lives, and I can't go to dinner because I have to go home and like work and things like that, but it's when the timing is right, you just have to like do it.
I think for me, a lot of the personal growth came from having to understand what motivates me to work. Earlier on in my career, when I was working for more traditional companies, I took a lot of pride within the things I'm able to deliver for the company, but I realized that I put too much of my self-esteem in there. And I think that, especially for Asian founders, because we grew up in households where we take so much pride in the kind of work and the kind of quality of work that we're able to put out, I think this is a kind of natural reaction. But as a founder, you can't be like that, because there are going to be a lot of ups and downs that happen, and there's nothing you can do about it. It's not because you didn't work hard enough, it's not because you didn't do X, Y, Z, it's because that's just what happens, right? That's part of the business cycle. So detaching your ego from the actual company is super, super vital, and something I had to figure out. I think the other side of it too was learning the work-life balance side. Because obviously, like, you do have to work weekends, you do have to work nights, you can't go to dinner with your friends, but you also do have to take time out for yourself. And figuring out when is it okay to take time out for yourself, because it never feels like it's okay. But you still do, because you might not realize it, but slowly but surely you move closer and closer to that burnout. And figuring out the balance between, hey, this is a pressing need, our clients are yelling at us about this, but I'm gonna take half a day off for myself because I need it. That's something I had to kind of figure out, but I think it's been tremendously valuable in my growth as a person as well as a founder.
Yeah, I mean, I totally relate to both of those points. I think it's really difficult to like be young and have to figure out like, do I work more, like do I work less, and it's a very personal decision that you have to make, and really, really have to know yourself. And I think you don't really know yourself when you're very young and don't have a lot of experience. And then on that first piece that you touched upon, like what really motivates you, I think it's something that we're kind of, at least for me, like I'm seeing this shift in between like the like my parents' generation and our generation, where I think the more like commonly accepted definition of success is like you work at a company from like right after graduation, and you move your way up into like a higher like director, VP level, and you stay at the same company for many years. But I think our definition of success has been shifting in a way where we care a lot about like impact, we care about career fulfillment, we care about identifying with your work, and I think it's really important to like figure out what motivates you, like what is your personal definition of success, and how do you get there. So I guess like my last question before turning it over to the audience is, if you could give yourself 2 years ago one piece of advice, what would it be?
I think just don't think about it. Like, just do things. Like, I think when you think too far ahead, you tend to try to optimize for features that don't exist. And honestly, at this point, I don't know if I even think a week ahead at a time. Like, if somebody asks me, oh, what do I expect out of the company in 1 year? I don't know. I don't know. And I don't think anybody knows. And I think that's okay. Being comfortable with that is something that I probably want my younger self to feel as well.
I think I echo, similar things around just staying, just like keep on going, but also move quickly. If something isn't working, just pivot and move to the next thing. I think that's something that took us more time than we needed to. You don't want to let go of your first product, but if it's not selling, there's so many other things you can build. And I think that's a thing when we think about the era we're in now. I almost feel like for our customers, it's never how impressive the technology is. It's all about, are you doing something to solve their problem? And the technology at this point too, it's not, there's so many tools available out there for developers to build things. You can build things without being an engineer now. So it's all about, is there a problem and how do you approach the solution rather than the time and investment in actually building the product. So if you need to put up a new demo, then do it as quickly as possible, put it in front of people. If people like that one better, then invest your time there.
Thank you guys so much. I'd like to hand it over to the audience if anybody has questions for, yes.
Hi, and sorry I was late for this presentation. What I heard was awesome. Thank you. My name is Danielle. I'm also in Boston. I heard you at MIT. And I run a business called Rosetta Languages. So we provide interpretation services. And very recently, I was told by someone that AI is coming to eat my lunch. So I wanted to ask, since you guys know more about AI probably than anyone I've talked to before, what are your thoughts? Should I just be like, you know what, I should just quit? I should stop doing what I'm doing and like go work in a regular job or something? Or I'm just curious to hear what your thoughts are, about my particular industry. I can add to that my main line of thinking is that we're just going to lean into the human aspect of what we do more heavily, because if we try to mechanize what we're doing, then we're easily replaceable. But I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
I think for someone like me who's worked in AI basically his whole career, I'm probably the biggest AI hater that there is. So I totally get the fears that a lot of the media pushes, but here's how I contextualize it. I think AI has tremendously increased the effectiveness of people across industries and being able to do their work. It takes out a lot of the tedious steps and makes it easier for superstars to show that they're superstars. So what that means is that AI isn't going to replace your job, right? There's no one who can do you like you, but what it is going to do is going to make those people who are that special able to extend their impact to a much broader audience. So it is true in some sense that there are going to be fewer winners in any particular space because the companies that do well are going to do really, really well. That being said, I think to future-proof yourself, the best thing you can do is just understand what kinds of impacts can AI make in my field, and you don't need to be technical to be able to answer that question. You can go to ChatGPT or Claude or any of these things and just ask questions. See what you can find, and all of that is research that is on cutting edge because nobody knows how AI can best impact your industry today.
Yeah, I echo similar sentiment. I think the biggest thing is that I think we should all think about how we can use it and incorporate it to make our lives easier. Because, for example, in our industry, we're doing the things that are simple and easy to do because we don't want patients to wait on hold. But there are things that pharmacists will always have to do. Anything that's clinical related, a clinician always has to do. So I think there are these regulatory things in place as well, where there will always need to be a human to do certain things. And it's more about how can we do the tedious things with technology if possible to just make everybody's experience easier. But of course it depends on, is there wait time, what is the current experience of your users, and is there a need to adopt AI? I think a lot of fields, they may not need to, just because there's not as much impact in what they're doing. But in some places, there's so much impact that they just have to because they will simply go out of business if they don't.
Thank you. That's super helpful. I appreciate those comments.
Thank you for your question. Anybody else have questions for our panelists?
I've got a question. Maybe help to the mic.
Oh, behind you.
Behind you.
Thank you for coming and showing us your wares and your knowledge. I have a two-part question. The first part is I had met, or rather heard, a leading AI company CEO stating there won't be a need to knowing programming or coding because of the AI. But then in the talk we mentioned about things like SAP and Oracle. If we were to fast forward years from now, 3 to 5 years from now, do we sense the fact that it's more of an emphasis on low coding instead of using, like picking up like basic Python? And in that thread, are these sorts of careers, is it easier coming from a family that has wealth, a la what we just heard from crypto, or can anybody do it who has an internet connection? Thank you.
I think in terms of when we think about like low code versus traditional code, at the end of the day, low code, it's very dependent on what low code you're using. There are certain things that, there are a lot of tools that are available out there to build large language model applications where it's very drag and drop, but that doesn't serve our purpose because we have to integrate into existing systems. So there's a lot of this, back-end connection and pipeline and those sort of things we need to do that a low-code platform simply hasn't built because they don't have enough customers who have that need. That's something that's unique to our company. So there is no low-code way to do the things we need to do. I think some of the, low-code is super helpful and so nice to make things that a lot of people need, right? Whether it be like websites or things that are, a simple SMS-like campaign, marketing things, that's where I think it's advantageous. But if you want to build something from scratch that is truly solving a problem, I feel like you really need to, you're going to have to integrate into the existing systems that require that code. And I always forget the second question.
Do you need to come from wealth to be able to do this space? We just heard a crypto guy speaking, and I gather that some people call luck, which I call blessing, but from your angle, from your vantage point, is it more feasible from if you have come into a state of wealth, whether through family or just through crowdsourcing?
I almost think wealth is almost like, when we think about it, is like connections, right? Can somebody make an introduction? When we think about creating demos, honestly, there's so many ways to get free credits for things. AWS gives you 100K to just put something up. So it's almost, if you want to build something, you don't need as much money unless it's a physical product. But it's those connections. But I do think, I was fortunate enough to go to MIT, and that has opened a lot of doors. That's why I do think people have a lot of technical trust in me, despite the fact that I may be young. So it's almost, I think, the things that you have done, whether it be side projects where you went to school, where you've worked, that almost makes a bigger impact than, nobody's asking who my parents are and things like that. So.
I think on the topic of no code, I want to talk about a particular anecdote from around 15 years ago. So Pega was one of the first companies that came up with this idea of no code or robot process automation. You have this beautiful UI that allows you to drag and drop different operations into this nice little screen. And the promise was that you would have non-technical people, think your product managers, think your managers, your execs even, being able to do all this processing and being able to replace the job of software engineers. 15 years from now, Pega still exists, but now there are Pega consultants that basically do Pega for companies. And I think this is a relatively telling anecdote because there's something fundamental about software engineering that I think a lot of people don't get, and that is what's hard about software engineering is thinking about the software engineering, not dragging, dropping, or writing the code. And I think that's something that's not going to change regardless of what medium software engineering ends up taking place in. So software engineers aren't going anywhere. And that's why I think tools like SAP and Oracle, as much as I personally hate integrating with them, they're going to exist, or companies of that flavor are going to keep existing. So I think this is just going to be a perpetual thing, and it really reflects the job of the software engineer as more understanding business problems and being able to translate them into modern tooling rather than being able to write code. That being said, I do think that there's going to be a transition of software engineers more and more to be sales engineers, where the focus is going to be more on how can I be as close to the customer, or maybe even in the customer's teams, like a Pontus or forward deployed engineers, versus building an internal platform where I don't really talk to anybody but my manager. On the topic of wealth, I kind of agree and disagree with Saumya. I do think today it's easier than ever before to be able to put up a demo, to be able to share it using the internet, and all of that is wonderful for being able to see the startup world kind of blow up globally. But I do think wealth helps in a lot of ways, not just in building connections. Obviously, being able to go to a good school, having the connections to have the unfair advantages we were talking earlier about, they all help. But wealth also means that you have multiple shots, right? If you think about the average person who wants to create a startup, they're kind of ride or die with their first idea, because if it doesn't work, they have to make money. Like, you have a certain amount of time within your 20s to be able to build wealth in order to make sure that you can have a comfortable life growing up. So being able to have wealth or have savings means that you can take multiple shots, and in a world where nobody's first idea is right, that's such a huge advantage.
Thank you.
Any other questions? We have 2 minutes left.
I actually have a question for Jess.
Oh, okay.
So I want to kind of hear from your perspective, how did you come up with the idea of Asian Founders Club, and basically where you think the next few years are going?
That's a really good question, and thank you for asking that. I honestly came from a school where, I didn't really feel like I had a community of people who shared a lot of the same values as I did. And I think I grew up, was always really interested in entrepreneurship, making an impact, innovation, and thought I would be able to explore that more in college. And I think while there are programs set up in place, I guess for context, I went to Penn on the East Coast. There was not really like a community of people who were like widely interested in that. I think like everyone's like, okay, if you're studying business, you're going to go into banking, you're going to go into consulting, or like go down the corporate track. And I think kind of going into startups is something that's like not very sexy or not very just not cool, unless maybe you go to Stanford. But anyway, I never felt like I had a community of that. And at the same time, I was like hosting events for this Asian business organization that I was a part of, where I got to meet a lot of really cool like Asian leaders, but I think they were all like 20, 30 years older than me, where I felt like I get it, but I think there's also a lot of like new ways to be successful in this like day and age where like tech and startups are very scalable. And like content is also like really scalable as well. And I think I also noticed the shift of like, the definition of success changing, as I mentioned before, around really wanting to start something straight out of college and like not like work my way up first. And so I started a newsletter where I started interviewing Gen Z founders and creators, and then I met a lot of really great people. And ended up starting to like live in hacker houses and eventually host events when I moved to New York City. And then that last component on I think being Asian is there is a very different perspective that you have when you are an immigrant or you have parents who are immigrants, because at least for me, I'm second gen, and I've seen a lot of the struggles that my parents have faced in moving from China to the US and being able to give me the opportunities. And I think I've always felt the desire to make the most out of the opportunities that they've given me, and for that, to do that, I think that means like really pursuing my dreams and my goals and doing something that fulfills me. So yeah, realize like there are a lot of people people who feel and think the same way, and wanted to bring those types of people together because, at least for me, it was really hard to find similar people, and that was how I got the idea for Asian Founders Club. Thank you guys so much for taking the time to come out here. And yeah, if you guys want to chat with me or any of the panelists, feel free to come and chat with us.
All right, what's your interest in this? Sorry.